Martin V12 Vantage. This is where it all started back in 2009, and the formula was genius. Take Aston Martin's largest engine, shove it into their smallest car and hope for the best. But my God, did it work, because what we got here is a 510 horsepower, 6-litre naturally aspirated V12, rear-wheel drive, 6-speed manual gearbox and a subtly enhanced chassis. Simple but brutal. And listen to this. It's a beast, this thing. It's an absolute wrecking ball of a car. I love it because it's not trying to be a race car. These seats are squidgy, there's no stuck-on aero bits. It's just a V8 Vantage that's been gobbling the steroids. And now there's this, the all-new V12 Vantage. And yep, you guessed it, it takes the big engine small car thing to a whole new level. But before we get into all that, how about a history lesson? It all began with the Vantage RS concept in 2007. It looked good and there was a flood of interest. So 2 years later, the 2009 V12 Vantage production car arrived. £135,000 for a 6-litre V12 manual gearbox, rear drive coupe capable of 190 miles an hour. Bargain. In 2011, a V12 Zagato race car. Well, two in fact, a red and a green one named Zig and Zag that finished 5th and 6th in class at the Nürburgring 24 Hours. A year later, you could buy one for the road, mechanically identical to the V12 Vantage, but with a double bubble aluminium body that took 2,000 hours to create. In 2012, they chopped the roof off the V12 Vantage. Also in 2012, a V12 Vantage GT3 race car arrived, and it was handy, going on to take 4 Drivers' Championships in British GT. 2013 and the V12 Vantage-based CC100 Speedster arrived and blew our minds, as well as our hair back. Only 2 were made. Also in 2013, the Gen 2 V12 Vantage arrives. Power up to 565 brake horsepower, top speed up to 205 miles an hour, an auto was offered initially, but a 7-speed manual followed. In 2015, the Mad Bad GT12 was a 592 horsepower track-focused monster. Noisy too. In 2017, the V12 Vantage AMR took the GT12 spec, but made it a bit more usable and added a stripe. And in 2018, we got the ultra-exclusive Vantage V600, a wide-body GT12 offshoot with holes drilled in the bonnet that cost £1.2 million for some reason. Which brings us back to 2022 and the brand new V12 Vantage. Got it? Excellent. I'll be honest, the first time we saw the new Aston Martin V12 Vantage in the Top Gear office, it wasn't exactly a resounding success, but seeing a car in person for the first time in the sunshine is a completely different kettle of fish. So I'm going to attempt to explain why it perhaps didn't go down so well with the aid of that prop over there. You see, the original V12 Vantage, when it arrived in 2009, had a bit of a skunk works vibe about it, like it was never part of the product plan. An idea hatched in a particularly boozy Friday afternoon in the pub that they would take their biggest engine and cram it into their smallest car, and then the bodywork would just swell and slash to accommodate it. Whereas this car, it looks like it's trying a bit hard, and Aston Martin should be elegant, and this is just a punch in the face. And part of that is down to the fact that the track is 40mm wider than a V8 Vantage, and then you've got this enormous U-shaped vent in the bonnet, which is a nod to the GT12. That's the most aggressive, the loudest version of the previous gen V12 Vantage. Coming down the side of the car, you've got these quite intricate side vents, but I'll move on because I don't like those at all. And then round the back, you have this enormous rear wing bolted on right across the rear deck and then wrapped around the sides as well. So that will give you, apparently, 204 kilograms of downforce at 200 miles an hour, which sounds impressive, doesn't it? Except realistically, you're not going to be doing 200 miles an hour, are you? So we would delete that immediately. It is a no-cost option to remove that wing. And that highlights an interesting point about the V12, because the way that you spec it is crucial. You can have all sorts of crazy colours and exposed carbon and brightly coloured highlights along the sills here, but we think the more understated, the better. Let the muscle do the talking, not the frilly bits. I say your V12 Vantage, but if you haven't already got one, don't go calling your dealer. Only 333 will be built, costing upwards of $265,000 each. Compare that to the 135 grand for the original, and they're all sold out. Notepads out then, here are the numbers. We have a 5.2 litre twin-turbo V12 producing 690 brake horsepower and 555 pounds-feet of torque. We also have an 8-speed automatic gearbox, no manual option anymore, and rear-wheel drive with a proper mechanical limited slip differential. 0 to 62 miles an hour takes 3.5 seconds, and the top speed is a nice round 200 miles an hour. So the chassis has been beefed up with new anti-roll bars, new bushes. You've got 50% stiffer springs at the front, 40% stiffer springs at the rear. Carbon ceramic brakes are standard. That saves about 23 kilograms in total. And then you've got these optional carbon fiber shell seats. They're a Aston Martin patent, no less. They save about 7 kilograms. They lock you in place. And I'm pleased to report they're more comfortable than they look, although I do keep catching my arse on this bolster when I get in and out. But despite all this carbon fibre, this is a car that weighs 225 kilograms more than the V8 engined F1 edition. And that's a bit worrying. Okay, so let's talk about this powertrain. We'll start with the gearbox. It's an 8-speed auto, not a twin clutch, but honestly, it's not a problem. Upshifts, downshifts, it works brilliantly. I particularly like these long metallic paddles, which have a super satisfying click to them. So a big tick there. And then we get to the engine. 5.2 litres, twin turbo, 690 horsepower. It is an absolute monster, this thing. When the turbos really light up about 3,500 RPM, the wall of torque that hits you is just astonishing. It is a ferociously fast car, this. Probably too fast to deploy on a regular basis on a classic British B road like this. But, and there is a bit of a but, I just don't think it's that exciting. Perhaps I've been spoiled today by the fact that we've been driving the original car with its naturally aspirated engine, and when you rev that thing out you get this lovely metallic rasp at the top end. But here the turbos just seem to mute everything. It doesn't have the character, it doesn't give you the reason to keep your foot in and let the revs rise. And I tell you what, we'll knock it down to second gear here. Now listen, I'm not saying that wasn't fun. That sort of performance is always going to open your eyes and give you a slap around the face. It is a force of nature, this engine, but it just doesn't seem to match the race car for the road looks. The brakes, yeah, they're more than adequate in the power department, perhaps a little bit over servoed for my liking, and they have been making this slightly strange groaning noise at low speeds today. But the steering, yes, that's something that I really, really like. The way that it just moves off the dead ahead, there's absolutely no slack. Here we come into this series of corners and the nose just moves in precise correlation to your hands. Some of the Italian supercars have this really highly geared steering, over caffeinated I call it sometimes, but not this. The steering feels absolutely bob on. And the front end grip, well, on this road, on this day, it's endless really. We had a dusting of rain earlier and the only slip I've experienced is from the back axle when I've got a little bit frisky with the throttle. In terms of the ride, you've got 3 settings for the damper. The first, the softest, I'm going to call busy but livable. The second one, brittle, and the third one, mildly painful. So if you live in the UK, here are my recommended settings. Keep the dampers in their softest setting, but dial up the powertrain to maximum attack and take control of the gearbox manually via the paddles. That way you can breathe some life and some character into the powertrain and get the most out of this car. And at the risk of sounding extremely old-fashioned, this car really could benefit from a manual gearbox. It would add that extra layer of interaction. You would require that extra bit of skill to get the most out of this monster of an engine, but Hey, what do I know? They're already sold out. The driving modes, by the way, are actually called GT, Sport Plus and Track, although this pre-production car still says GT, Sport and Sport Plus. So, is this car what I was expecting? Yes and no. Yes, because we're familiar with this V12 engine. We've met it in the DBS, we've met it in the Speedster. We know that it's an absolute torque factory, but it's not the most flamboyant V12 out there. Fine. What I wasn't expecting was how aggressive this chassis was going to be. You sense that this car wants to do its best work on track, and that simply wasn't the case with the old car. That was just a beefed up road car with a big set of lungs and a muscle car character. Today, on this road, I think I'd rather be driving the old one. Okay, so we definitely need to drive this car on track to get a full picture, but from what we've seen today, is this the car to steady a company that's struggling on the F1 grid and, if reports are to be believed, not in the rudest financial health right now? Of course it's not. This is the Exotica, like the DBX 707, designed to keep the company's halo intact, not its bottom line. And may I just say that I am massively grateful that Aston Martin is brave enough to build a car this wild, but I think it's a bit of a misjudgment, because if you want a track-ready Vantage, then the lighter V8-powered F1 edition just does that job better. This is undoubtedly a rarer car, it makes more of a statement, but by being simultaneously heavier and more hardcore, it ends up being a bit confused.